Welcome to episode 29 of On My Studio Table. Soon we'll have the 30th episode, another little milestone for my YouTube channel, which is still growing, and I so appreciate it. Thank you to my regular subscribers and to my new subscribers. I'm really glad to have you join me on this platform, which actually is more enjoyable than I expected it to be. I'm having a lot of fun with it, actually. I have a piece hanging behind me, which is a work in progress. And it may look like it's hanging crooked, but it's actually not. It's a sample from a weaving mill in Tasmania called Waverley Mills. And it was one of their rejects because the weave and the colour are not straight. But I thought it would make a great background for this piece of work. I haven't done a lot to it since I showed it to you last, several videos ago, but I have done some diagonal stitching, which you'll see near the big circle, about a third of the way down. And I'll be doing more of those kinds of rays on the background, mainly with just simple stitches. And as I work, I may add more stitching. I never really know. I think it has a kind of a planetary theme, or to do with the heavens or the solar system, but we'll see how it develops. Maybe you've got some ideas about what it looks like to you also. I have quite a lot to cover in this video because I've been doing a lot of things. I do enjoy what I do, so sometimes it's hard to put the brakes on, and I sometimes think, well, why should I? I'm a free spirit, I am my own person, but I do need to, as I say, come up for air sometimes, so I try to spend some time outside, as I mentioned in my last video. So I've done some gardening and a few outside jobs and just enjoy doing those things in between the other things that I do. It's funny because since working from home, I think I've been busier than when I had a shop or a gallery front. And maybe it's harder to actually give myself a timetable. That could be the reason. And then I wonder why I'm really tired at the end of the day. But it's a good tired. So without further ado, we'll continue with the video. I do hope you enjoy what I've got to offer to you today. And please watch the whole video. I am noticing in my statistics that some people are only watching about 3/4 of it. And I don't know whether that's because people are fast forwarding through it or what's happening, but I would really appreciate it if you watch the whole thing. You never know if you find something interesting that you might have missed otherwise. Thank you and enjoy. In my last video, I showed you my progress on this art journal that I'm making as part of a series that a group that I'm in is doing with Kathryn Chambers. As you know, I've mentioned her year-long project, my slow stitching journal, but this is a different journal. This is an art journal. So I've done a lot of collage and stitching in it. I've made the covers. I haven't totally bound it yet, but I have done some binding, so I'll just take you through that. So here's the first signature, and I've done a pamphlet stitch binding, and it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hole pamphlet stitch binding, and it's holding the whole thing together, fabric and paper pages. I've done some extra stitching as well to add more texture to the book, but I think I will still do a little bit more. I think I mentioned that in the last video. So I really like how it all looks when you hold the signatures together. I've added some smocked pieces, as I did mention to you, and somebody did have a guess at what my theme might be. And I did say yes to this person that they got it right. So if you want to know what the theme is, just have a look at episode 28 of On My Studio Table. The playlist is in the links in the description below the video. What I specifically wanted to show you today was this little pocket. I'm not sure if I had stitched it up last time, but anyway, I have stitched it up. I've put the word pocket on the top of a little bit of linen and some old sheet music margin, but I've also made a little book for it. And if you've been following me on Facebook and Instagram, you will have seen this little book, and I've actually made some more, which I'll show you in a moment. So it just unwraps like this. It's got a found button on the front, and I've lined it with some tea bag paper, and the pages are also used tea bag papers. And when I opened these particular ones, I made a slit in the middle to empty the tea leaves. So what I've done is I've actually mended the slits, which means that this book is about mending. And I've stamped the word mend with my little letter stamps on the piece of paper that's actually patching the little slit that I cut. And then each page has had a different type of stitching on it. So there I've just used a straight stitch and a chain stitch with a little elongated end on it in 2 colours. I think I've skipped a page there. This one is just straight stitches, and you can see actually the cut there that it's holding together. A continuous fly stitch, a cross stitch, and some little stars. And then at the end I've done, oh, not quite at the end. Next is a feather stitch, and then a combination of straight stitches and cross stitches, and then the word end and a little bit of sheet music to patch the slot in the last page. You can still see the packaging from the tea bags through the tea bag lining. I really enjoyed making this. I stitched it together with waxed linen thread, just with a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and you can see the lovely fern print on the back. And then this bit of waxed linen thread is used for the tie. So all I do is wrap it around the back, bring it around the front, and put it around the button. And I've tied little knots in the ends as well. And that carefully goes back in the pocket, because sometimes the button gets caught and I don't want it to rip. There we go. And that theme of mend is related to the theme of the book. So it's coming together. I'm still thinking about how I'm going to bind it, and once I do, I will share it with you. I'm thinking possibly some type of tab binding, and I've just been checking on a few ideas and techniques before I actually tackle it. So I'll be sharing that as soon as it's ready. Once I'd made the tiny book for my art journal, I couldn't help but make some more. I just think they're adorable, maybe because they're so tiny. On the cover on the front, I have put some phrases from the sheet music that I've been using in my art journal, which are piano exercises by Carl Czerny from, I think, the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And this is about finger exercises, and so we've got imparting strength and imparting flexibility. But I actually thought that was a really positive thing to put on these little books as well. And these are going to be giveaways for my VIPs and Ko-fi supporters. I've again used a button and some wax linen thread, but they're put together in a different way and they have a different type of tea bag. So I'll just put that one aside. So we undo the wax linen thread, the waxed linen thread. This time, instead of just sewing the button on, I've actually tied it on. And these flaps were actually from the tea packet that the tea bags were in. And so I've just used them as little flaps that fold inside the book. I lined it with some of the sheet music from the Carl Cerny piano exercise book because they were a little bit weak in some places and it needed reinforcing. Probably because when I did the opening of the package initially to get the tea bags out, I was a bit rough with it. But these are the longer tea bags that were glued in the middle. So I just cut off each end and emptied them out from each end, emptied the tea leaves out from each end. And then I thought, well, these will make good pages. And I've done my little Gone Rustic stamp on the back with my website. And the whole thing just folds up again like this. And then this wraps around. Whichever direction you want to. And there you have your little book. Now this one is much the same, but I'll open it anyway so you can see it. So this one is imparting flexibility. You open the flap, which has a nice little bit of bracken fern on it. Eucalyptus leaf there. And again, the sheet music lining and the tea bag pages. And I just did a pamphlet stitch to attach these. So it's a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. And to close it, just fold the flap, close it that way, and wrap the wax thread around. A family member suggested that I do some postcard style cards showing some of my artwork. So I've done a few just to see how they would go. This design is actually a project I made a couple of years ago, an art journal made out of rice paper. And I was so pleased with the way the rice paper eco-printed. It's actually quite fragile, so I put it between sheets of other paper so that it wouldn't be damaged. And I think I've also used Cardi paper and some blank sheets of sketchbook paper as well. And then on the back, just so that they can still be used as postcards, I've just got Gone Rustic, Rita Summers, and then the title of the work, a very brief description, and my website. So these I'm putting in with my mail orders with a note on the back, but I am thinking of having them available for sale. So this is so that people can collect a little bit of artwork at a lower price. They can use it as a postcard or they can just keep it. Another design is an eco print that I did on canvas of a fern. This is a Tasmanian native fern, and I did share this in a video recently. And I just loved the texture of the canvas and the way the fern printed. It was near a rusty can, which is why it's so dark. And on the back, it just says fern, eco print on canvas, and my website, and also Gone Rustic and my name. Here I've overlapped a couple of eco prints that I did on paper, and I really love the texture on this, and I've called it Forest Floor because it just reminds me of the forest floor with all the leaf litter and partially decaying. and then on the back, forest floor and what they're made of, and so on. Last but not least, the little bit of freeform smocking that I did, and this is a photo I took before I added any more stitching. And as you know, I have done more freeform smocking without adding any embroidery. And that was laid on the top of an eco print on paper, and I called it Gathering because that was the theme of the exercise that we did. I really can't help myself. I seem to be on a roll with making little books and journals, and I've started this journal just in the last couple of days using papers that I eco-printed in my last eco-printing session. But as part of this, once I'd done the collage on the pages, I had a lot of scraps left, and I thought, wouldn't they make a great little book? So of course I made another little book. This has been sewn together with a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and I've put a piece of text on the cover. Across the globe, 40% of all flora and fauna species live or breed in wetland ecosystems. And that's what this whole project is about. It's about the wetlands and how they are endangered and threatened. When you open this little funny cover piece, I've put a piece of text from some of the material that came to me in the mail about the endangered wetlands, travelling through its ephemeral swamps to permanent waters. And some of the phrases are lovely. It was just advertising material to support an organisation that is trying to raise awareness and also asking for donations. And I have supported them in the past, but we now have our own little bit of nature that we're looking after. So that's where some of our funds are going now. And just other phrases that may not make sense on their own, but, you know, might trigger some thoughts as you look through it. Some of the text are excerpts of descriptions of the different birds that are endangered because the wetlands are decreasing. Another phrase, woodlands drink, grasses sprout. And just little torn bits. And I just love the way the layers work together. These are mostly as I tore them around the pieces that I collaged in the main piece. And I just like the edges and the textures. That was a piece of the envelope. Then I stuck the barcode and a few other bits. Protect. And there's a bit about one of the ducks that's endangered. A bit of a swamp land here with a branch of a tree. And then back to the back cover. So that's going to go into this art journal somewhere. I'm not sure where yet. I'll just take you through. It's definitely not finished. All I've done is just glued some of the papers in, and then I'll add some stitching and who knows what else. Pockets, fold out pages, whatever else. And again, some of the phrases out of the material that I was sent made great titles and descriptions for the pages. So the cover says, "Where water thrives." And that's the back. Just move that along a little bit. When it floods, water ripples out across the plains. And again, where water thrives. And that's finished on the next page, that phrase. Where water thrives, water birds fly. And then I've put significant wetland there. And this is a bit of the parchment paper that I shared last time. It's a little bit see-through, so you can see the sheet music through it. And I'm interspersing some of the pages with some sheet music. I'm reinforcing the edges because I'm going to do a slip knot binding on this, and it needs to have a nice strong edge. I had cut a piece out here, so I've patched it with a bit of eco-printed paper. So I have all these scraps of my eco-printed paper, and I'm using them to reinforce the edges of the sheet music. This was the envelope that the material came in, and it had a window. So I've kept the window, and this slides in. It may go onto a little piece of eco-printed paper as well, I'm not sure yet. But it says, in this wetland of national significance, water birds bathe, breed and nest. The place sings with the cycle of life. Hope reigns over despair. It's not often you get advertising material that's so poetic. You can see some bracken fern there, some eucalyptus leaves, some tie lines from the eco-dyeing process. And on the envelope there are some birds in flight over water. And that's the back of that page. And there are more water birds in flight. I think they're black swans and threatened species or species. Another bit of parchment, so you can just see a little bit of the sheet music through it. This is quite dark from the eco-printing. And a complex mosaic of interconnected waterways. Everything is really connected in nature, and when we damage one part of it, it usually has a long-term effect on other parts of nature. Another patch and some reinforcement. So these will probably have something put on them as well, but I'm not sure what yet. This one doesn't have any words, but I may add some words later. So these are leftovers from tearing out the other collage pieces. I love the look of sheet music. Some of it I keep to play as well. Some of it's probably a bit too difficult for me, but it is nice to see the music. It's just got a lovely visual aspect to it, I think. And when you think about birds and the fact that they sing, it just seems quite appropriate. This is a little pocket. It's quite tight, so I'll have to put something quite thin in there. And that was a sticker, so I've torn that and kept the outsides of it, stuck them down as well. Waterholes and swamps. And that's a brolga. And if you know anything about brolgas, they actually have what we call a dance that they do in the breeding season, I think. And it's very, very graceful. It's a bit like ballet. So if you Google brolgas dance, I'm sure you'll see some film about it. Really amazing. They don't live in Tasmania, but they are an Australian bird. And this is a duck. That may end up with some text, and certainly I'll be adding some stitching. A couple more sheets of sheet music. I like the way this one was a bit torn on the bottom. And then inside the back cover, waterbird breeding site and a black swan with a little signet riding on its back. They do this. They carry their signets on their backs while they're swimming. So I'll share more about this on Facebook and Instagram, but probably also in my next video, maybe the next couple of videos. A lovely surprise arrived in the mail yesterday. A large envelope or package came, and I opened the package, and in the envelope that was in the package, it seems that I've won a People's Choice. I recently exhibited in an exhibition at the Jane Seychelles Gallery at St Helens on the east coast of Tasmania, in a group exhibition organised by Belinda Stinson, who operates Art Trails Tasmania. And apparently I won the theme section, and I haven't checked which theme it is that I actually won, but it's just nice to know that people really liked what I put in the exhibition. The books that I won, I haven't got here with me to show you, but they are also fibre related. And even if I don't use them, I can pass them on to people who might enjoy them. So that was just a lovely surprise. And thank you, Belinda, for organising these exhibitions. There were several exhibitions, and as I said, mine was in the one that was on the East Coast. I've been experimenting with ways to seal eco-printing in a natural way. And these pieces that I've got on the table, I did with beeswax pellets. So it's 100% pure beeswax. I have the container here so I can actually show you. And if you can see that. This is the refined beeswax. I guess you could also use the unrefined beeswax, and you could even grate it if you had a candle, for example. I got it from Australian Wholesale Oils, and they'll last me a long time in that size container. Anyway, what I did was I placed them between sheets of parchment paper or baking paper, sprinkled some of the pellets on top, and then folded the parchment paper on top and ironed it with a hot iron, not on steam, just a hot iron. And the wax melted and it coated the paper. I also experimented with cloth. So this is seeded silk, and it's actually quite stiff now. And this is another piece of silk as well. So as you can see, it does change the colour. It makes it darker, but this would be great for collage, and it's actually sealed in a natural product. Some of the eco-printing that I do has quite a lot of iron in it, and it will rub off on your fingers unless you wash it. But because some of my papers are fragile, I can't really wash them. And I thought this might be a way to seal those papers in particular so that they aren't so fragile and they will take stitching and so on when I do my artwork. One of the other things that I experimented with, I'll just put those away, was some leaves. So these were also done in the same way, laid between sheets of parchment paper, one underneath and one on top, and a few of the little pieces of beeswax scattered on top. You don't need many, and when you iron it with the parchment paper, you can actually see the wax melting and spreading, and you can see where it hasn't reached. So you can peel it back and you can add a few more in spots where it hasn't reached, and that makes it quite easy to make sure you have good coverage. And then what I do is I turn the whole thing over, open it up, put a few more bits of beeswax on the other side, fold it over and iron it again. And that way both sides are encased in the beeswax. So they may end up being used for collage as well. Then I thought maybe this would also be a good way to attach pieces together. So I tried that with a piece of fabric, a tea bag, used a bit of tea bag paper and some old journal paper, and it actually worked quite well. I already had waxed them, and then I laid them together and put them between the parchment paper again and ironed them again, and they bonded together. If I want to, I can peel it off, but I just thought it was an interesting experiment which you might like to try. These are some more leaves that I did. So these are various types of eucalyptus leaves. And again, both sides, as I did with the fabric and the paper. There is a bit of a whitish colouring there. That might be where I've put too much beeswax. But I'm quite happy with that. And they are still flexible and they feel a little bit leathery now. And the same with the paper and the fabric. The pellets are laid on top of the papers and fabric with parchment paper underneath, and then parchment paper is placed over the top as well to protect your iron. Then you use a hot iron without steam, as I explained, and you press rather than iron to make sure that the pellets melt. And you can see them puddling in between the layers onto the paper and fabric. If you find that it hasn't given a good coverage, you can do it again with more pellets. The other thing that I wanted to do was to experiment with some wax paper. You used to be able to buy this in the supermarket, in the kitchen section, along with foil and glad wrap and those sorts of things. It's very hard to get now, and I actually bought it from a craft shop at Sprayton in Tasmania. And so I've been experimenting with that. And again, it was mainly because I wanted to be able to cover papers that either were fragile or had a lot of iron on them and tended to smudge. So these were quite fragile. That was a very thin drawing paper, and this was a map of our local area. That was a bit of text paper from a very old book. And so is that. And so I did both sides. What I did was I put them in between a folded piece of waxed paper and then put parchment paper top and bottom or baking paper, and then ironed it with a hot iron and then flipped it over and did the back as well. So here are some more pieces. And you can see that this one is fragile because it has holes in it. And it also had iron on it from the Rustic hands that I use, and it would have rubbed off on my fingers before, but it doesn't now. So you can't even tell that there is wax paper on this, or that there is wax from the wax paper on this. So I think this is probably my preference because you can't really see it, but it just depends on the effect that you want to have. So these were all scraps that I just experimented with. Another thing that I wanted to try the wax paper idea on was on papers that I've painted with my own paints using the earth around me. So this was done with some garden soil and some sandstone soil, which I made into a paint and then cut a stencil out of freezer paper, ironed it on and painted it through the stencil. And when it's dry, you can rub some of the paint off. And I wanted the paint to be textural, so I didn't grind it up very finely, fairly finely, but not totally smooth, because I wanted the texture, as I said. But the problem with that was that it does tend to gradually come off. So I did try other ways of sealing it, but again, I wanted a more natural way to do it. So I've done this between sheets of wax paper, and now it doesn't rub off, which is really good. And this is rice paper too, so it's quite fragile, and the wax has actually strengthened it a little bit so that when I stitch with it, it should hold together better as well. And this is another piece. This is also rice paper, and I've done the wax coating on this too, and it has my earth paints on it, a stenciled shape. It looks like a leaf just there, and some rust printing from the Rustic can when I initially eco-printed it. So it was first eco-printed, and then I did the painting on it made of the earth around me. These are some more pieces that I did with the wax paper, and it still rubs a little bit of black onto my finger, but it's quite fragile, so I didn't want to wash it. So I may need to give that another go with the wax paper. So 2 or 3 times would probably be a good idea with something like this. I've only done that once, so I'll do a couple more goes and just see if that helps. As I said, it's probably too fragile for me to wash it. When you use waxed paper, you need to put the waxed paper in between sheets of parchment paper. Otherwise, the wax paper will stick to your iron. And then you just press it like you did before to make sure you get good coverage, and so that the wax really sticks onto your papers or your fabrics. In this case, it's papers. You can do this with leaves also, and it will give a nice seal to the items without causing a sheen, as happens with the beeswax pellets. And you just keep ironing until you're sure that you've covered everything, and then you flip it over and do it from the back as well, just the same as you do when you do the beeswax version. And you repeat the pressing, making sure that you cover everything with the heat. And remember that the iron is also on a hot setting without steam. And once you're happy with what you've done and you're sure that you've covered everything with a layer of wax, then you can take the papers apart and have a look at the result. I'm so enjoying doing the Slow Stitch Journal with Kathryn Cloth Tales on YouTube. There have been some really great ideas, some of them quite challenging, and each week we've had a different exercise to do relating to slow stitching. So we're nearly at the end, the book is nearly full, and I'm just going to show you the latest one that we've done. I've said this before, that we are free to interpret each theme the way we wish to. And that's been really a lovely thing about these exercises, that what Kathryn shows us is a springboard, and we can either do exactly as she does, or we can use it to generate our own thoughts and ideas. What I thought I would do with this one was to do a scroll. So I've just done a little scroll that is tied. I'll just undo it. And I've done it on a piece of silk, and the exercise was to do text on cloth and to stitch text. So there were all sorts of thoughts like asemic writing, using your own handwriting, doing a stylized, simplified type of writing. I decided to use my own handwriting. So I wrote lightly on the cloth the sounds of rain on our tin roof. In Australia, we have a lot of corrugated iron roofs, and we often just call them a tin roof. And the sound of rain on it is really beautiful. Even when your house is insulated, you can still hear it. And because we've got verandas right around the house, you really do hear the rain when it falls. We've had a few downpours lately, and then it's nearly deafening. But when it's a gentle rain, it's just a lovely musical sound. So I've done a few lines of straight stitch in a blue colour just to signify rain, and I've also done the word rain in blue. I've just used a back stitch and a few French knots. I've just stitched a torn piece of cloth with a cloth stitch to the page, and then I can roll it up and put it back. It's gently raining today, just what we need before bushfire season. So I just wrote this after I made the stitched cloth, and with this one, it's from my journal from a couple of years ago, and it finished with a very Australian sound.